This is Ray Mooney's Wild World of Wet Shaving. Let's begin. Hey, this is Ray Mooney. Welcome back. Today I'm thrilled to have the chance to chat with the one and only Will from Barrister and Mann and Berceuse Parfum. Welcome, Will.
Hi, how are you, Ray?
I'm doing good, thanks. How are you doing today?
Oh, I'm hanging in there, thank you.
Excellent, excellent. So I'll dive right in with my questions. Uh,
Okay.
you started Barrister and Mann in 2013, I believe, on the idea that
hmm
fragrance in men's grooming could be better. Better, more interesting, and more creative than what existed at the time. That's at least what I think I've heard you say in other interviews. If you will, take us back to what the scene was like then.
Ooh. Haha. Okay, so when I first got started wet shaving, the artisanal world was really different.
Okay.
You had Mike, and Mike had pretty much broken new ground in terms of performance. Like, I love Mike's soap. His scents are pretty simple, and that's fine.
Yeah.
It works really well for him. But he had really
That's
broken
Mike's
new ground.
Mike's
Yeah,
natural
Mike's
soap.
natural soap.
Okay.
hmm
Right.
Yep, sorry.
No, not at all.
And at the time he was in Brooklyn, I think. And then he moved to Ann Arbor, Michigan with his now wife, and then I think now he's out in Portland, Oregon or something. Anyway, this isn't about Mike. So the point is that Mike had broken new ground where performance was concerned, and he was sort of, the talk of the town at the time. And there were a few other artisans. There was Mama Bear, who I learned recently sadly passed away, I think last year. The business was sold, and so there's another woman running it now. But Sue of Mama Bear is tragically now gone.
Okay.
Um, and she did a lot of, kind of out of bottle stuff and a lot of melt and pour, and that, that worked for a lot of people, and that was cool. And then there was Queen Charlotte, which I mean, like Queen Charlotte's huge claim to fame was their Vostok soap,
Oh, all right.
which at the time was the first of the hypermentholated soaps.
Ah,
This was a trailblazing idea in wet shaving.
this was
I that was the only
before
one.
sorry,
Sorry.
this was before the synthetic coolants, I guess.
Yeah, long before. This is much more along the lines of cryogen.
Okay.
Cryogen is sort of the spiritual successor, and cryogen to my recollection, is colder than Vostok was, but Vostok was still like horrendously cold. It was not,
Right.
I did not find the shaving experience pleasant, to be honest with you.
Especially,
But I
especially
mean, like,
someone with sensitive skin, I imagine.
yeah, yeah. I mean, like, and I didn't try Vostok until I had already been wet shaving for a couple of years, and I'm not fond of menthol as a general rule. So
Right.
I bought it for market research purposes, and I tried it because that was when we were developing our critique.
Ah.
And I tried it and I was like, "Oh my God, this is not comfortable. I don't like this at all." And there were a few others that sort of existed in that space. There was a company called Yeti Snot, which was
Oh,
a melt and pour soap that was along the same lines as Vostok and Cryogen. It had just buckets of menthol added to it.
it's a
Um,
bit of an unappealing name.
yeah, it was. It
Okay.
never really struck my fancy, but
Right.
to each his own.
For sure.
And then there was Michelle of Mystic Water, who even then was making what I think is the same formula as she's making now,
Okay.
um, and turning out some interesting and unusual fragrances. But I was looking for more.
Right.
Um, so originally. Barrister and Mann was sort of the product of the fact that I needed to pay my living expenses during a legal internship in San Francisco.
Okay.
Um, San
And
Francisco even then cost an absolute fortune to
I'm
live.
sure. I'm sure. And you were already into wet shaving at this point.
Yeah, I had gotten into wet shaving in February 2012.
Okay.
When I stumbled across Wicked Edge. I don't remember how. Somebody linked it in some thread, I guess.
Right.
And so I stumbled across Wicked Edge, which at the time was like 7,000 people.
Oh, wow.
It was tiny. Yeah, I
Yeah.
mean, like this was in the very, very early days of the wet shaving culture on Reddit.
Interesting.
And like Beetlejuice was still very active. There was a guy named No Helmet who was a machinist and knew all about straight razors, and he used to do shave demos and stuff and talk about other people who were selling straight razors and whether or not they were full of it.
It's very interesting, though. That's
Yeah,
very different than what
yeah.
the community is now.
Yeah, it was in some respects it was kind of the Wild West. It hadn't really gotten to the point that it reached in like 2015, 2016 where things got really crazy and very political and cults of personality developed pretty rapidly, but it was sort of the early trailblazing days of the wet shaving industry.
Okay.
And so yeah, I mean like the only person doing like really advanced perfumery in any way, shape, or form was Michelle. And Michelle's fragrances are nice, but they're pretty simple, and she leans pretty heavily toward essential oils, which, works with her brand, and I understand that completely.
Right.
Oh, and who else was still in business? I think Ginger's Garden was around about that time. I think Arena had already gotten started. And a lot of what Arena does is sort of in that same space. Or sorry, rather more in the space of like the kind of stuff that Sue at Mama Bear did. She does a lot of inspired by and that sort of thing. I'm not sure how much independent fragrance work she does.
Okay.
You'd have to ask her. Anyway, so there were three or four of us who got going kind of all around the same time. So it was us, me, primarily me at that point, and then Chris at Katie's Bubbles, and Douglas Smythe at what's now Phoenix Artisan Accoutrement. At the time, it was How to Grow a Mustache, and later Pedal Pusher Fancies.
Okay.
Um, and so yeah, Barrister and Mann had come about as a way to pay for my living expenses while I lived in San Francisco because
Yeah.
I couldn't work like a night job as a stock boy while I was, working full time in a law office.
Right.
I needed to get some sleep. So um so basically the way this worked was that I launched the company from my apartment in Boston.
Okay.
And I was making soap on the weekends in a crock pot, which was an absolutely horrible way to make soap. It's
Hmm.
just awful. It's
Isn't that how
incredibly difficult
many?
to regulate.
Sure. I think many people start like that, though.
Yeah, yeah, because it's easy and it's the barrier to entry is really low, but they're very hard to control.
Right.
And the risk of boil over is very high, and they get wickedly hot. And so they're tough to work with. I'm glad to no longer be doing it that way. Let me put it that
Right.
way. So, anyway, so I had been making soap and I was making it on the weekends and like shipping orders after class. And this just, I like at the time, the barrier to entry for e-commerce, for small e-commerce businesses was much higher. Like Twitter had just really come into its own. Like the world was a very, very different place. This was just after the Arab Spring. Like
Yeah.
the internet was just a completely different environment than it is now. And so I had no shipping software. I signed on with MailChimp when MailChimp was still independent before it was an Intuit company.
Company. Sure.
Yeah, so my first website was built on Wix, I think, or
Wow. Okay.
Weebly. I don't remember if it was Wix or Weebly. It might have been Weebly now that I think back. I think it was Weebly. Um, and so within like a couple of weeks of launch, I could not make soap fast enough. I could not ship soap fast enough. And
Fantastic.
I was like, well, this is yeah, great, but this is a problem because I still need to be able to work at the law firm
Sure.
that's coming up.
Yeah.
So I called my parents. I called my dad specifically, who's gone now. But I called my father and I said, I can't make soap fast enough. I can't do this fast enough. Um, what do you think about my bringing it home and you guys make and ship the soap and I'll do everything else. I'll do the marketing and the development and all that stuff. I'll email people, the whole thing. And they're
Right.
like, yeah, okay, cool. So that was kind of how we got started. And I promise there's a reason that I'm telling this story. I tell this story every time I'm interviewed in any way, shape, or form, but I promise there's a reason I'm telling this story.
Yeah.
And so the young lady who I lived in when I lived in San Francisco, I lived in a house in Upper Bayview with 14 other
Oh,
students.
wow. Okay.
Yeah, the couple that owned the place had renovated it, and their whole idea was to build what was basically a hostel.
Sure.
But we each had our own rooms. I mean, it was about the size of a lofted broom closet. It was not a comfortable place.
Right.
But I mean, like it was a bed. It was Upper Bayview, so I don't know if you know this about San Francisco, but generally, the higher the elevation in the city, the safer you are.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah, it's one of those things that you encounter in like very hilly cities, but San
Right.
Francisco especially, and this is it's just true. Like the higher up the hill you go, the lower the crime rate. It's kind of weird, but that's how it works out. Or at least that was how it was then. I'm not sure if that's still the case, but that's how
Right.
it was then. So anyway, the young lady who lived next door to me, lost her mother that summer. She was 18. And when I say lost her mother that summer, like I met her mother before she died.
Oh, boy.
Yeah.
Okay.
So and they had perfume had been something that really they shared that was very special to them as mother and daughter.
Yeah.
And so she needed a friend, and I've kept in touch with her over the years, and she's still very much into fragrance, and she actually has like the most remarkable private collection I've ever seen. She has things from like
Wow.
the collection of the Sultan of Oman, like unique bottles because she knows people who know people. So
Neat.
anyway, so she needed a friend, and she was like, I'm gonna go. One day she said to me, I'm gonna go down to Union Square this weekend and go smell perfume. Do you want to come with me? And I was like, okay, I don't really know a lot about perfume.
I was going to
That
say,
that's
had you ever
yeah,
considered that as an activity before? No.
no, not
Right.
really, not really. I was like, I don't know a damn thing about perfume. Sure, let's do it. I'm in. And so we went down, and I saw a walk around Union Square recently, and it does not look now like it did then.
Right.
Let me put that simply. But at the time, there was an Neiman Marcus, there was a Saks Fifth Avenue, there was even an Art of Shaving in Union Square.
Okay.
But most importantly of all, there was a Barney's New York.
Yeah.
And this particular Barney's had the largest collection of independent fragrance I have ever seen
Oh,
in any store ever, including stores dedicated to the purpose.
wow.
They had hundreds of perfumes,
That's
things I had never heard of before, things I've never seen since.
sure. Amazing.
And yeah, and so I talk about this fairly frequently, but at the time, Barney's had commissioned DS and Durga to produce a line of fragrances for them exclusively.
Ah.
And it was called Highlands, Hylnds.
Hmm.
And it was built around like these very kind of poetic, somber sort of images. Like the one that always sticks out in my mind, other than the one I'm about to talk about, it was called Pale Gray Mountain, Small Black Lake.
Oh boy. Okay. Very,
Like,
very descriptive. That conjures something very specific.
right?
Yes.
Deeply evocative name, and
Sure.
the fragrance lived up to it. Like it was
Okay.
cool.
That's neat.
So, but the one that really got me into fragrance and really sort of determined the direction that Barrister and Mann would eventually take was a perfume called Bitter Rose Broken Spear.
Huh.
And
Also,
again, this is one of those stories I tell a lot, but it was supposed to smell like an ancient battlefield, and so it smelled like blood and iron and flowers and gunpowder and all of these other things. And
okay.
Ray, I have to tell you unequivocally, it smelled disgusting.
Fair enough. If it smells like a battlefield, I imagine,
Exactly. And
Right.
so it smelled like blood and flowers. Like that was
Yes.
literally what it smelled like.
Interesting.
But the thing about it, and the reason that I kept coming back to it, and the reason I still come back to it over a decade later,
Yeah.
is that it had never occurred to me before that fragrance could be art
Sure.
and not just be something that was meant to make you smell good.
Yeah, that's
Because it objectively did not smell good.
right. But that's an amazing revelation and interesting that
Yeah,
it came through something that didn't smell good, but yet was
yeah.
probably very evocative.
Yeah, and it was so inventive and so daring. And I always say to people, like, God bless the folks at DS and Durga for having the courage to bring this to a company like Barney's
Right.
and being like, hey, look at what we designed for you. And God bless the buyers at Barney's for being willing to put it on a shelf.
Sure. I wonder how much it sold, actually, but
My
yes,
guess is not a lot.
not a lot. Right.
No, probably not.
Did you leave with
But
a bottle, is the question.
I did not.
No.
I was a broke law student.
Right. Fair
I
enough.
regret not having left with a bottle, to be honest with you. I bought no perfume that summer. And that's the one bottle that I've always regretted not acquiring. I could probably
Interesting.
find one if I really dedicated myself to it, so I may do
Right.
that at some point.
Okay.
Simply because it's so personally important to me. I'll never wear it. It'll just be there.
Right. Fair enough.
Although,
Add
you
to
know
the
what? After
collection.
after 12 years, my it's entirely possible that my sense of art and perfumery has evolved quite considerably, and it might be less off-putting to me than it once was.
Interesting. I would think so. Because I
Yeah.
mean, I've heard that in grade six you made perfume for your mom. So I was going to ask if that's where it all started.
I mean, like I did do that.
Yeah.
Who told you that? Was it my mother herself?
No, no, that's on the internet.
Oh,
It was from
oh,
another interview that I watched with you and your
oh,
mom,
okay.
actually.
Okay, all right. Yeah, I mean, like I did do that, but I was making something pretty for my mom, you
Sure,
know.
of
It
course.
wasn't the same thing.
No, no, no. Imagine
Um,
not.
so basically we continue to do this. We continue to go down and smell different perfumes and experiment with different things. And the fact that Barney's had such an extensive collection of highly unusual work
Right.
um was revelatory. I mean, like I could explore any number of different ideas and never leave the fragrance floor.
Sure.
So, um, when I almost immediately began to think like, I really want to do this. Like this is cool. And no one else in the shaving world was doing that kind of work.
Right.
Like, and it just hadn't happened. It just hadn't been done. And you could argue that the idea of bringing high perfume to something like shaving soap is, let's be generous and call it stupid. Uh,
Well, fast forward to today, and it's very, very prevalent. It's almost not quite a prerequisite,
yeah,
but it figures, prominently.
yeah. I mean, like Sean Marr is famous for saying that, and I think Chris had reiterated this to you, had repeated this to you that shaving soap is the worst medium
Yes.
imaginable
Yes, I've
for
heard that
fragrance like
many
this.
times, indeed.
Yeah, yeah. But it was something I wanted to do this because I thought this would be a very cool way to distinguish ourselves, and I was really into it already.
Right.
And so, almost immediately I came back from the West Coast and almost immediately began to design much stranger fragrances and
Okay.
much more daring fragrances than I had done previously or really that anybody else was doing then.
Sure.
So, yeah, that was kind of how it started. At the time, people were sticking with, fragrances that were either essential oil or they were a couple of notes or they were out of a bottle because they were safe and that,
Yeah.
nobody really gave any thought to doing this full time.
Sure.
So it was there was not a lot of reason to distinguish yourself in that way.
Right.
And so to suddenly consider the concept that we could take fragrance and make it art and pour it into shaving soap and you could shave with it was a pretty different idea than what
Sure.
had been considered in the past, at least to the best of my knowledge.
Right. Absolutely. So almost like a trailblazer in a certain sense in that respect. It's neat.
Uh, yeah, I mean, like somebody would have gotten there if it hadn't been me.
Perhaps, but I think we're all glad that it was you. But does a law degree specializing in intellectual property law jive well with the development and creation of products for that sort of company, a sort of soap slash
As
fragrance?
as a matter of fact, it does.
I would imagine it
Um,
does, yes.
yeah, so people always say to me, "Well, you should patent this. You can't patent shaving soap.
Oh, can you not?
You cannot. At least not in the United States.
Okay.
I don't know enough about, say, the Canadian patent system to tell you if you could patent it in Canada.
I wouldn't think it's very
But
different, but
yeah,
perhaps.
probably not. Probably not. I mean, like we overhauled our patent system right around the time I started the company. Actually, the America
Oh,
Invents
okay.
Act overhauled how the patent system in the U.S. worked pretty significantly.
Right.
But in the United States, the requirements are that in order to be patentable subject matter, something has to be new, useful, and non-obvious. And it's the
That's
non-obvious
and
part
that's
that's the big
that's
one.
you're right. That's open
Yeah.
to a lot of different interpretations, I imagine.
Yeah, well, and they each one has a very specific definition, and the non-obviousness is the one that's frequently difficult to overcome for patentable subject matter. And the way it works is that a reasonably prudent person, this mythical standard that exists
Yes.
in American jurisprudence, a reasonably prudent person having all of the necessary qualifications in the field would not consider this solution obvious, having access to all of the assembled research and available what they call prior art.
Wow. Okay.
And that's both a specific and completely vague
Right.
standard.
Yes. Sounds very, I work in advertising, so it sounds very much like
Yeah.
ad agency or ad copy speak.
Yeah, yeah, very much so. So, but to put it succinctly, shaving soap does not, at least in the way that we think of shaving soap, does not meet this standard.
Okay.
And it's not really new, for the most part.
Yeah.
Is it useful? Yeah, it's useful, but it's not really new, and it's definitely not non-obvious in most cases.
That's definitely not.
So, yeah.
Okay.
And fragrance categorically cannot be protected by any existing standard of intellectual property law.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah, you cannot. I mean, like, so there are unusual exceptions to this. Lancome has been able to convince, I think it's a Dutch court, that their formula for Tresor is distinct enough that they can protect it. But
Interesting.
this is very much the exception that proves the rule because to the best of my knowledge, it's the only one of its kind.
Wow. That's surprising to me. I would think you would be able to patent a specific formulation or a specific, just
Well,
as brands tend to protect themselves or try to at least.
you can't because so you can't patent recipes or formulas in general.
Okay.
You can't even copyright them. So if you buy a cookbook,
Yeah.
what's copyrighted is the arrangement of recipes and all the other stuff in the book.
And the
The
design of
recipes
the book.
themselves are functional and are not
Huh.
considered art
That's
and are
interesting.
not copyrightable.
Okay.
And so
Today I
fragrance
learned.
formulas, yeah, fragrance formulas are considered to be functional formulas,
Yeah.
and they are thus not considered artistic under the legal definition of the term, and
Okay.
thus they cannot be copyrighted.
Right. Very interesting.
Yeah,
Interesting.
there are questions as to whether you can trademark a fragrance.
Yeah.
Um, for the most part, the answer has been no.
Okay.
Uh,
I imagine
there
from time to
are
time someone tries to challenge that in court.
Yeah, and every so often, like some unusual thing will make it through. Like, you know what? Actually, nothing is coming to mind at the moment because I was thinking Play-Doh and Johnson & Johnson baby powder, and neither of those has ever been successfully protected, partly because Playskool and Johnson & Johnson have tinkered with the fragrances so many times that they've forgotten how to make the originals.
That's very funny. Well, there you go.
Yep. Yep,
No.
they don't have the necessary formulas. So the original fragrance for Play-Doh and the original fragrance for Johnson & Johnson baby powder will never come back because
Wow.
they lost that
They've been lost.
documentation. They don't have
That's quite
yeah,
remarkable.
yeah, lost knowledge.
Incredible.
So the only way to protect, quote unquote, protect a fragrance formula is through trade secret law,
Okay.
which in the day and age when somebody with say $25,000 and a chemistry degree can go buy a gas chromatograph and a mass spectrometer,
Yes.
you're not hiding anything at all.
Right.
And frequently what'll happen is some big release will hit the market and all the dupe houses will buy a bottle, they'll run it through the machine, and then they'll start
Knocking
turning
it
out
off.
copies.
Okay.
Yeah.
And that's perfectly
So
legal, I guess.
it is perfectly legal because
That's
it's not
interesting.
secret
Right.
because
It's very
they possess
interesting.
the knowledge to penetrate the secrecy, so it's not secret.
Hmm. Okay.
Yep.
So we got the barrister part of the business name down. Where does man come from?
The woman I was dating at the time
Yes.
thought that my interest in wet shaving in general was insane. And
Okay.
I had mentioned to her that that I thought there was possibility in a soap company uh to pay my expenses in San Francisco, and so I asked her for suggestions on a name, and she said to me, "Soap makers." And I said, "Soap makers of something." And I said, "Soap makers of what?" She said, "Soap makers of Awesome Town,"
Right.
which we
Yep.
later did as an April Fool's joke.
Yes, indeed.
And I actually, to be honest with you, Ray, I designed labels that said that.
Initially, what after she came up with
Yeah,
that. That's funny.
because
Okay.
I didn't have a better idea.
Sure. Fair enough.
So, but I wanted a two-part name because I thought it sounded more distinguished and I thought it sounded very English,
Yeah.
which, what I was young and dumb. So, the barrister part was obvious, and then man came from the fact that it was originally intended for men, and I decided to stylize it by adding a second N.
Fantastic. I think it works very well. From, my experience in advertising and marketing, it resonates and it has this certain cachet and austerity to it that, to me, it works very well. So
Yeah.
there you have it. For whatever
It's
that's
it's
worth.
endured. Yeah.
Yes, it has indeed. So would you consider yourself more of a perfumer or a soap maker or sort of a bit of both? I mean, you certainly fall under both categories.
I'd like to be more perfumer than I am soap maker, but in truth, I'm probably more soap maker than I am perfumer at this point.
Okay.
I tried to break into the perfumery world
Yes.
pretty hard.
Sure.
Um, Unfortunately, my major attempt to do that was when I launched Berceuse,
Yeah,
and I launched Berceuse right into the teeth of the pandemic,
that's
which,
sure. Who
yeah,
knew though that that would happen? But
yeah,
yes, the timing stinks, of course.
yeah. I could not possibly have predicted it, but I couldn't get any traction because I didn't have the kind of cash necessary to just send out thousands of free samples to
Right.
whomever asked.
Yep.
And for whatever reason, I was not really able to get the perfume review sites to review the
Oh,
perfumes.
okay.
They just they were just not interested, and I remain mystified as to why. I had worked with perfumers who were both very, very highly regarded. They're both still working.
Yeah.
I I thought the concept was interesting. I thought the fragrances were beautiful, and it was like pulling teeth.
Interesting.
So I gave up.
Did you? But
To make a long story short, I gave up and returned to the shaving world.
yes,
And
Berceuse
I
exists though, right?
It does. It's now. I mean, like it was always a subsidiary of Barrister and Mann,
Yeah.
but now it exists on the Barrister and Mann site alone. I shut the Berceuse site down,
Okay.
which was a real shame because I had in 2019 we did this very very cool. Um, I think it was no, it couldn't have been 2019. It had to have been like 2021. We did this very cool photo shoot with a photographer in Boston for the release of Minneapolis 5.3,
Yeah.
And I have all these beautiful photos, and it's been a little tough to showcase them because they're so different from Barrister and Mann's branding.
Sure. Understand.
So I just sort of sitting on like 70 photos that
Oh
I
boy.
don't really know what to do much with. So, but anyway, the the whole thing about it was that I did not compose those fragrances, and I think that might have been part of it. Was I had taken basic inspiration from how zoologist functions,
Right.
and I think that was my mistake. I think there are very few people alive who can make that work, and Victor Wong is one of them. So,
Interesting. Why do you think that is? That very few
uh,
make it work.
it's hard. So the perfume world, as much as the shaving world, is very much about cults of personality,
Okay.
or brand cults of branding,
Right.
and to not have everything wrought by one hand can confuse people, I think.
Fair enough.
And so I tried to filter it through the lens of shared experience, and I think the concept was a little too convoluted.
Okay.
Um, and Victor's great gift, or well, among his many gifts, um, is he has both an eye. He has two truly great gifts that have made zoologist what it is. He has a remarkable eye for design. He's a
Yes.
graphic designer himself.
Oh, is he? Okay.
Yeah, that's he worked for, I think, a video game company. He might have worked for Ubisoft before he did zoologist.
Interesting. Okay.
But you'd have to check with Victor to
There's
to
also
clarify that.
Caleb Ellsworth, who was in the video game industry, the razor maker.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
Right.
Yep. Yep. And there have also been a number of lawyers who have ended up in the shaving world, like
Interesting.
John of LA Shaving, is a former attorney.
Oh,
Lee at Wet Shaving Products is a former attorney.
get that. Wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
So, anyway, but yeah, so as a result of my having largely abandoned the niche perfume world in general, I have only completed one true perfume since that time, and that's Lavender Interrupted.
Yes.
I have sketches for a number, and all of them have been every fragrance I've ever done, with the exception of Romance in Middlesex County, or other every perfume I've ever done, with the exception of Romance in Middlesex County, has been in service to my chasing one particular idea,
Really?
which I have yet to connect with.
Okay.
And so I've explored it in a number of different ways over the course of the last 8 years. This goes all the way back to Fougere Gothique. But it just does. I haven't been able to hit it just
Right.
yet, and so what I've done instead is I am going to resume work in the next few months, and I'm basically going to throw everything out and start over. Because
Okay.
I'm just not hitting the point that I'm looking to hit. But as a matter of profession, I would say that I'm largely a soap maker. But as a matter of what makes me happy,
Yeah. Passion.
I love perfume.
Sure.
Perfume
Understood.
perfume is my love.
Okay. That makes a lot of sense. How about the username? Excuse me. I think it's on Reddit. I don't know if it's on other platforms as well. Boston Photo Tourist. What's the significance of that? I love it. It's
That
very evocative.
Yeah, that came from the idea that I was just sort of walking around Boston taking photos of stuff.
Okay. As simple as that.
That was
Great.
that was it. I encountered a street dance team at one point, and I was taking photos of them, and I was doing photos of, some of the really cool buildings in Boston. And
Yeah.
Boston 12 years ago, or 15 years ago, was a very, very different town than it is now.
I imagine.
Um, it was rougher in spots, but it was more organic.
Okay.
Now it's been so thoroughly gentrified by the influx of biotech and the tech industry in general that it's polished to the point of sterility in a lot
Right.
of places.
Yeah.
If you go to the seaport, which was completed basically after I got to the city, and actually I think after I had graduated from law school already. If you go to the seaport, it's very, very, very corporate.
Yes.
Everything is incredibly polished, and you see people walking around. Women go out for a jog, and their makeup is all done, and their hair is done, and you see them go by. It's like, why? Why?
Yeah.
Why
Yeah.
did you do that? Like, but yeah. So Boston was a very different town then, and it was. I don't want to say it was more photographable, but I was more interested in photographing it.
Okay. And you enjoy taking photographs? Is that a thing?
I'm a fair to middling photographer at best, but yes.
Yeah. No, that's great.
Um, yeah, I mean a lot. If you see like a lot of the photos that you see for Barrister and Mann now are things like this the season of the witch photos. I did all that.
Oh, really? Wow.
Yeah, so I do most of that stuff.
You do
I don't
most
have
of
a
your labels
studio.
too, right?
Yeah, with
That's
only
great.
a couple exceptions. Yeah,
Yeah.
I do all the label work.
So
So
multi-talented then. Wonderful.
more necessity is the mother of invention.
Well, yes, but they resonate. I can tell you that. So I think that's great. Um, 10 years ago, I think it was 10 years ago, it was on an AMA on Reddit. You talked about, I think it was an AMA as well. Look at me, I'm all confused. 10 fragrances. You added three to them that every man should smell before they die.
Yes.
You still stand by those 10, or we'll call them 13 because you had added three in the
Oh, perfume has changed quite a lot.
Okay.
Masculine perfume has changed quite a lot
Right.
in 10 years. Um, Men got into fragrance,
Indeed.
basically.
Yes.
That was pretty much what happened was that um I was sort of the harbinger of a larger sea change in masculine identity,
Yep.
really, where men suddenly realized that it was okay to smell good and it was okay to care about fragrance. I mean, like,
Sure.
there had always been a subset of the masculine population that was interested, but it became suddenly less weird.
Right. And more diverse,
um,
less for just,
yeah,
attracting females or what have you.
yeah,
Um,
yeah, exactly.
so much more new.
I mean, like, so the YouTube fragrance world still very much turns on the axis of, well, will this get you compliments? Will this get you laid?
Sure.
Um, I have always considered those two metrics to be in poor taste, or at least the latter one I think is in poor taste. The former, the idea that a fragrance has to get you compliments in order for it to be worth anything seems odd to me. I actually said to a friend and customer of mine yesterday that fragrance is the only form of art where it's a completely different experience to wear a fragrance than it is to smell it on someone else.
Yes.
Right. And so like I think of this in the respect of like the shared, the artistic commons, the idea that you could hear somebody say playing a song in a boombox on the street and you're just sort of like you both have your own separate experience and you also have a shared experience.
Yes.
But the difference with fragrance is the gap in those experiences is much wider.
Right.
For one thing, a lot of people who smell you will have no idea what you smell like. They won't recognize it at all.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas somebody might recognize their favorite song on a boombox or an iPhone, or I gotta remember what year we're in now. We're in 2025, where people play songs on their iPhones or whatever phone, their Android phones at
I
full
still see
volume.
the odd person with a boombox. It's more of a,
Yeah,
Bluetooth speaker, but nonetheless, some people still like
yeah,
rock out and
fair,
walk around and expose everyone to their music.
fair. But the point here is that like you'd hear the song and you recognize it and be like, oh, I know that song. That's a great song. And
Yep.
you might say to your friend, hey, you hear that song? I love that song. And you might know something about the artist. You might say something.
Sure.
But, or you see a painting, right? Like so everybody has a different view of what the Mona Lisa is like, but we all recognize it for being the Mona Lisa. Like it's the most famous painting in the world, you
Yes.
know? But if I were to say walk out of the house wearing Guerlain Mitsuko, the number of people who would recognize it for what it is and for whom it would be personally important is
It's
pretty small.
very limited, sure.
And the wearing of a fragrance, as I said, is a very different experience from smelling it on someone else because of the nature of fragrance, because of how it interacts with our biochemistry, because of
Absolutely.
its evaporative profile. Everything about it makes it unique. And so it's not like anything else.
You're
And I'll
right.
be honest with you, I have now lost the plot for what we were talking about.
It's okay. I mean, it started with the list of 10 fragrances.
That was it. Yes, the list of 10 fragrances and whether I stand by them. Um, so things like Eau Sauvage have changed quite significantly in
Yes.
recent years. They've been reformulated very heavily. Eau Sauvage is not what it once was. Is not what it was even 10 years ago.
Okay.
Especially because Dior, for some bizarro reason, decided to dilute their own trademark and release a fragrance called Sauvage, which only the diehards can tell apart from Eau Sauvage unless they know what they smell like.
Sure.
Because I mean, like you'd never confuse one for the other if you know what they both smell like, but you might confuse one for the other if you're just talking about them.
Right.
And that's like the cardinal rule of stupid things that you don't do
Hmm.
in trademark law. So yeah, it doesn't make any sense. Anyway, that's neither here nor there. The point is that some of these fragrances have been discontinued. Some of them no longer exist.
Some of them from
Like
that list.
Le
Okay.
Parfum de Therese has been discontinued because Frederick Malle sold the house to Estee Lauder, and they decided
Right.
that anything that wasn't making them megabucks had to go.
Off. Yeah.
And so Le Parfum de Therese was tragically lost. It no longer exists.
Interesting.
Um, the other thing is that we have had a number of new and remarkable fragrances come into being over the course of the last 10 years. Things like Luban Corrigan, which is one of the most breathtaking uses of lactones and caramel I have ever smelled in my life. It is
Interesting.
a work of genius.
Wow. Okay.
It is truly a remarkable perfume. It is very much something that cannot and should not be attempted by everyone, but everyone should smell it.
Sure.
And the thinking here is that like feminine fragrance has become so thoroughly entwined with the idea that women should smell like candy.
Has it?
And yeah, I mean like so much of mass market feminine fragrance, the stuff that really gets a lot of talk and sells a lot of bottles and generates a lot of money. Things like Marc Jacobs Daisy,
Right.
which I find reprehensible.
Yep.
Um, or like the Victoria's Secret line, and we won't discuss the fact that Victoria's Secret is failing, but they've pumped out like how many different bottles of disgustingly sweet fragrances over the years. And things, it sounds like I'm being uncharitable, but these things have no
No, but I
nuance.
mean,
They're just
that's it. It's mass market appeal, right?
exactly.
Yeah.
And the thing is that they market to the lowest common
Well,
denominator.
exactly.
Gone is the idea that that everyone should that a fragrance should complement your personality and everybody just wants to smell generically good. And you saw
Sure.
this especially in the rise of things like Beredo elevator music or Eccentric Molecules number 1 or Glossier U. These fragrances that don't really have any aroma of their own. They just complement your natural biochemistry, which is
Right.
the biggest line of marketing BS you can imagine.
Well, of course, especially because everybody's body chemistry is different. And
Exactly.
and the same fragrance won't smell the same on two different people.
Exactly,
Yeah.
exactly. And like a lot of these fragrances, like Paganini's violin was actually born of that same concept, and I had originally intended it as a commentary on this idea, and I originally called this fragrance Perish the Thought.
Right.
But
Bit strong.
I just
Good,
yeah, I decided that people would take umbrage with that concept.
perhaps.
And then I heard that story about Paganini, and I was like, wow, like that also really fits with this concept really well. This idea of like an undefinable um characteristic, this undefinable fragrance where you know what it is when you smell it, but you can't really put your finger on what it smells like. And I thought that was a very cool way to pay homage to one of the greatest violinists of all time, if not the greatest violinist of all
Right.
time. And also, I just thought that's like my understanding is that that actually happened. That story is true,
Oh,
and
really?
I love the absolute chutzpah of it. I just
For sure.
just the absolute ballsiness of it is just a riot, and he was
Yeah.
known for that kind of thing.
Okay.
So yeah, I mean, like the thing is that there are still certain classics that have endured. Like even Eau Sauvage in its sort of damaged state is something that you ought to smell just because it's historically significant. It was the first of
Sure.
its kind.
Right.
And Frederick Radnitska was probably the greatest perfumer of all time.
Okay.
And it was perhaps his greatest masterpiece. And that's like, I mean, like it's like comparing, Da Vinci's Blueprints of Venice to the Sistine, or not the Sistine Chapel, the Last Supper.
Right.
Like you're taking two remarkable works. Now, granted, one of them is architectural, one of them is artistic, but the point is that you're taking two works of a genius and comparing them to each other, and so at the end of the day, they're still both works of genius.
Right.
But Eau Sauvage was such a watershed moment in masculine fragrance, much in the same way that Blend and Bouquet was a watershed moment in masculine
Sure.
fragrance.
So therefore is
That
important in the history of it all and the
exactly.
story
And
of
so
fragrance.
if
Yeah.
you want to understand how we got here, yeah, you should smell those. But
Sure.
things like English fern is gone. Penhaligon's discontinued it. It's gone. And so a lot of this stuff you just can't find anymore. Like even I did not expect that list to change as significantly as it did, but by God, it did.
Well, and then again, it's over 10 years, so that's quite
That's
some
true.
time too, you know?
That's true. And then things like Mitsuko. I talked about Mitsuko.
Yeah.
Mitsuko for a long time languished as the sort of unloved stepchild of fragrance, which is a shame because in a lot of people's estimation, it may be the greatest perfume ever made.
Okay.
It is. I once heard Luca Turin refer to it as the Chypre perfected,
Hmm.
and I think there's a lot of truth to that idea because Francois Coty, released Chypre de Coty in 1917, and it was a revolutionary moment in perfumery. It was this remarkable, the birth of a new family, an entirely new archetype. But the story goes, and Guerlain has never confirmed this, but the story goes that Coty sold the formula for Chypre de Coty to Jean Paul. I think it was Jean Paul Guerlain. I don't remember which of the Guerlain perfumers it was. I always confuse Jean Paul and Jacques. Anyway, the story goes that he sold the formula to him, and the Guerlain perfumer took the peach-based Persicol and basically just poured it into the formula until he was happy with it and released it as Mitsuko.
Oh, okay.
And as it turned out, peach was what was necessary to soften all the rough edges of the Sheeper family.
Huh.
And to hear a lot of people tell it, it has never been surpassed.
Interesting.
And so, but the point of this is that Guerlain was purchased by what is now LVMH. At the time, I think was just Louis Vuitton.
Yeah.
But Guerlain was purchased by what is now LVMH in the late 90s. And they just sort of let the old catalog, the golden age catalog of one of the most storied perfume houses in history, kind of languish. They
Wow.
didn't really seem to care. They just started pouring out more and more and more fragrance. And then they hired Thierry Vasser to come in and they had made him house perfumer and he was putting out all these fragrances, and then they gave him a new job. And they're like, "We want you to fix the line. We want you to save it because the institution of things like the IFRA and the EU Cosmetics Directive prevents these fragrances from being made as they once were."
Okay. In
Um,
terms of ingredients or
yeah, I mean, like for one thing, most of those Golden Age fragrances contained nitromusks, which were banned internationally 1955 because they have a really unfortunate tendency to cause all kinds of cancer.
oh boy. Okay.
Yeah. And the real shame is that they smell
It's
fantastic.
always the best things that cause cancer.
Yeah. Yeah,
Yep.
like if you go and you find like vintage Shalimar or vintage Chanel number 5. I mean like yeah, they're a little battered by the ensuing decades, but damn, they smell great. They just
Sure.
the nitro musks just smell fantastic.
Interesting.
But so they gave Thierry Wasser a new job and they said, "Go fix what we haven't been able to fix until now."
Yeah.
Bearing in mind that oak moss had to be reworked and everything had to be refigured and everything had to be kind of cleaned up. And so what he did was not so much a reformulation as a restoration.
Okay.
It's like scraping off all the weathering off one of the masterpiece off a Rembrandt or something.
Sure.
And so he restored them to their former glory. And I had the opportunity to smell the fully revamped Mitsuko the last time I was in New York.
Yeah.
The other reason I didn't buy a bottle is that they were out.
Oh, okay.
I do not own any bottles of Mitsuko, much though I love it. I don't own
Oh.
any of them, but
But
I
it's
like I
still
said,
available.
it is still available. Yes, it's
Yeah.
very much still available. My favorite of the vintage Guerlain fragrances is actually Vol de Nuit,
Yeah.
Night Flight, which is this
Yes.
beautiful, beautiful old iris bomb. But that's tough to find these days. It's hard to come by. It's still sort of their unloved child.
Right.
But it's gorgeous. So
Every
yeah, overall the answer to the question is that I don't know that I stand by the list because I don't know that it's possible to stand by the list.
Fair enough. And it's been long enough too that things have changed. How
Yep.
long did it take you to teach yourself all of this, all everything that you know about perfumery? It's quite impressive.
I mean, I'm still learning. We're
Of
all still
course.
learning.
Well, life is always, a continual learning journey.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, like I got back from San Francisco and went to the Boston Public Library and basically made a list of every book they had on perfume
Oh, wow. All right.
and proceeded to read them all.
And I imagine there are many.
Uh, there are fewer than you think.
Okay.
And the reason for that is that unlike this is going to sound cruel. Anyone can go to art school.
Yes.
Not anyone can go to perfume school.
Right.
And the reason for that is that most perfume schools require a background in chemistry or physics or some other related
Understandably.
discipline.
Yeah.
And by background, I mean you have to have a degree.
Sure.
Um, Guerlain's perfume school, Isipka, is famous for that.
Yeah.
There are a few perfume schools that are a little different. Mann runs its own school in Grasse, where I don't think they require a degree. The Grasse Institute of Perfume does not require a degree. There are a couple of others, but the big really prestigious perfume schools, the Juilliards and the Oberlin conservatories and
Yeah.
whatever, the Sorbonnes of
Mhm.
perfume all require the significant background. And
Sure.
so um as a result, perfumers guard their secrets jealously.
Oh, I imagine.
And I mean, like, there have been a few truly brilliant perfumers who have just sort of dropped out of nowhere. Ernest Daltroff, the I don't want to call him the founder of Caron because he bought Caron, but he made Caron as we think of it. He made Caron what it is. Was completely self-taught, had no formal education whatsoever. I think he was Polish. I don't remember if he was Polish or Russian.
Okay.
Anyway, he just sort of showed up in Paris one day and bought a perfume house, which had been failing,
Yeah.
and turned it into an international powerhouse.
Amazing.
Had no formal schooling on the subject whatsoever.
I imagine that's the
I mean, like,
exception, though.
yeah. I mean, like, the thing is, the Guerlain family passed their secrets down from generation to generation for up until very recently.
Sure.
Um, Francois Cody died destitute, and so no one ever learned his secrets, but
Oh.
he deserved it because he was a megalomaniac and a
Hmm.
Nazi sympathizer, so who
Oh,
cares?
yes.
I mean, like, granted, we lost a lot of knowledge, but whatever. Um, but yeah, so I mean, like, perfumers don't the advent of the internet has made, perfume as a hobby possible, perfumery as a hobby
Absolutely.
possible.
Sure.
Because people can share information, and there are folks out there like Paul Kyler who are vast repositories of information who have devoted their entire lives to learning perfumery and know as much as any trained perfumer, probably more than a good number of them.
Wow. Okay.
Um, and so there are people like that who exist, and they're thankfully generous with their knowledge,
Yes.
as a general rule. And so I read everything I could from the Boston Public Library, but a lot of what I learned was just trial and error, was just experimentation, was reading the Bass Notes DIY forum and reading Perfume Shrine, and
Yeah.
which is actually why my version of Mousse de Saxe has seaweed absolute in it. Was a mistranslation published on Perfume
Oh,
Shrine.
no kidding. That's
Yeah,
funny, not funny.
yeah. So there was a mistranslation on their article about Mousse de Saxe, and they said that it contained iodine. And what they actually meant was it contained ionone, which is a completely different thing and smells like violets.
Yes.
Um,
The,
but
the difference a typo can make. Wow.
Yeah, yeah. So I read this and I went, if I just pour iodine into the stuff, like A, it'll be really unpleasant,
Yeah.
and B, I'll just destroy the fragrance. Like
Right.
iodine is not the kind of thing you want to just go pouring into perfume.
Absolutely
And I
not.
was like, well, how do I get around this? And I was like, okay, well, what smells like iodine? And I was like, oh, seaweed smells like iodine. And so I bought some seaweed absolute and experimented with it, and the rest is history.
Interesting.
But yeah, a lot of what I know. I mean, like I have a collection of perfume treatises, a lot of stuff that's some of my books are well over a century old.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Um, but and there are a few textbooks, there are a few works like this. Um, Curtis and Williams do the publish the Introduction to Perfumery book. There's been a few editions of it over the years, and it's a great introduction to the practice of perfumery.
Yeah.
It's an actual textbook. I think it's used in a number of the perfumery schools. Like it's a legitimate work. There are other books, things like Scent and Chemistry, that really get into the individual molecules and things,
Sure.
and so that's really cool. But the number of books on perfumery practice is probably fewer than 50.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah. So it's just not something that's written down a whole lot.
Right. Hmm.
And a lot of it's very technical. So you have people like Dr. Charles Sell, who worked for Quest International before it was merged with Harman and Reimer and became what we now know as Simrise or Simrise, depending on how you pronounce it. Um, and he wrote books on the mechanisms of olfaction and how to design new molecules and all kinds of stuff, and uh, interesting things about what makes specific molecules smell like particular things. And so those are very interesting works.
That
But they're
sounds very
very,
interesting.
very technical
But
because they're
technically,
written for,
right. You
yeah,
need some knowledge beforehand, even just to understand it, I imagine.
yeah, they're
So,
written for trained chemists.
yeah, indeed. So how many cents do you think you've made, or maybe you know exactly, over your career in Barrister and Mann so far?
At my last count, as of 10 years, which was 2003, it was 107.
Oh, wow.
But we've gone up since.
Yes.
So I could go back and count somewhere probably close to about 115.
Okay. Well over 100 in any case. That's
Yeah.
it's quite impressive.
Yeah.
Do you do many collabs or exclusives? I know you've done some, or I know of some myself, but don't know the whole.
No, I
No.
it's a rare thing for me to do one.
Right.
A lot of times I'll have somebody come to me and they're just getting started in the wet shaving business and they're opening a store and they want me to do a custom soap and they want to order 20.
Right. Yeah, no.
I am not doing the full work of designing a fragrance, developing the labeling, for making the
For
soap for
20
20
soaps.
jars.
No, of
It's
course not.
just it's just not worth my time.
Yep.
And I can't physically do it anymore. Like I have upgraded my equipment enough that I can't make fewer than 200 jars of soap.
Oh, really? Okay.
And even that's a challenge. Like it's hard to make 200 jars.
Right.
I generally try not to do it. The labor cost per unit increases significantly. Um, it's not fun. It's a hard way to make soap. It's not something I normally do.
Right.
Um,
So,
but yeah, I mean, I don't do a lot of collabs because a lot of times the quantities are not high enough to really make it worth it. And I know that sounds terrible, but
well,
unfortunately, I gotta consider the fact that I need to make a living
of
doing this.
course. Does that mean that Barrister and Mann has become big soap?
No,
No, good.
no.
That's the right
I can
answer.
tell you, as someone who has researched the commercial soap world quite extensively,
Yes.
Barrister and Mann is as far from being big soap as an ant is from being the Empire State Building.
Perfect. Excellent. That's the
I
perfect answer.
I called Bradford Soapworks in Connecticut maybe about 10 years ago.
Yeah.
Uh and they told me that their minimum order quantity, which they considered shockingly low,
Yes.
was 25,000 pieces per fragrance.
Oh boy. All right. So that's,
Mhm.
yeah, a huge difference.
They make all the Tide in North America.
Right. So different scale
They're yeah.
altogether.
Yeah, their output, their operating output, from what the guy at Bradford told me, their operating output is 1 million units a day.
Oh my. So yes, that's
Yeah,
nothing to do with this at all.
yeah, not even close.
Fair enough.
Just not even close.
So, myself being a graphic designer, I've played around, especially on the subreddit in the community, and done some fake labels over time. And I remember you reacting quite favorably and strongly to one that I had called schmaltz.
Yes.
You were actually curious as to where I procured it, although it
Yeah.
was from the deep recesses of my twisted head. Ever consider making soap with schmaltz? I know it's a very difficult, messy.
I've thought about it. I mean, like when we were developing Omnibus, I experimented with duck fat.
Okay.
And as Cullen told you, bird fats in general are hard.
Yes.
Um, I tinkered with the idea of using it as a supplemental fat to replace some of the tallow. I've looked into rendered chicken fat. I've looked into a number of other things, emu oil,
Oh, really? Okay.
and um, not seriously. No. I mean, like, if I were to do it, I think I would do a duck fat soap, and probably I would just like modify Omnibus a little bit, and I'd replace like some of the tallow with duck fat,
Yeah.
and do like a cooking spices kind of scent and call it schmaltz. I think that could be
Sure.
fun.
Yeah, that would be fun.
Um, but I think its appeal, especially with a name like schmaltz, would be
Well,
limited.
that's no. I agree. I agree. And I did it just, for fun, indeed. But
Yeah,
I
yeah.
love doing that. You ever have a happy accident in sort of soap? Well, I imagine you do all the time, but is there one that stands out?
I've had a number of unhappy accidents. I have
Yes.
scars all over my arms that
Oh
could
boy.
attest to that.
No, but just in terms of
Uh,
combining two different things that you didn't think would work and they work beautifully or something to that effect.
yeah. Uh, Brouhaha, which was a fragrance we did during the pandemic as a soft heart,
Okay.
was one of those things. Or actually, you know what? Even better, Leviathan.
Yes.
Leviathan is fun, and I always tell this story. And nobody ever believes me, but I promise you, this story is absolutely true. I don't know if I'd call it a happy accident, but it's one of those things that where I thought it might work, and as it turned out, it worked much better than I ever thought it might.
Okay.
And I remember calling my mother on my way home from Boston. And I said, I have an idea for a fragrance. And she
Yeah.
went, okay, what's your thought? And I said, I really want to do Russian leather and sandalwood. And she said, okay. And I said, but that's kind of boring. I had been inspired by a fragrance that Uncle Debbie had sent me, and he's not part of the community anymore. But um, Santal Nobile, I think it was called, and it was coffee sandalwood.
Huh.
And I'm sorry, I was working the other way from this, and I'm thinking back to my actual thought process for how this worked. And I called my mother and I said I want to do something with coffee and sandalwood. I said, but I it's too boring.
Hmm. Yeah.
And I said, but I like the idea of blending in leather. And I said, and I think leather has real possibility. And she said to me, well, why? And I said, well, I want to do Russian leather. And she was like, why?
Hmm.
And I said, because Russian leather specifically, now this is true of tanning in general, but especially Russian leather, requires manure
Oh,
in at least the classic method of tanning. I'm sure industrially they no longer do this, but at the time when the Russian Orthodox Church was developing methods for protecting their books from pests and developing a new type of leather to keep out the rats and the mites and goodness knows what else,
yeah.
they were using manure.
Interesting.
And I said to Mom, a really good cup of coffee smells like fresh dog poop.
Hmm.
And she went, "You're insane." And I was like, "No, no, I promise it works." I was like, I'm almost certain it works. I was like, "I will try it when I get home, but I'm almost certain it works."
Yeah.
And I got home and I deliberately, because I had this Russian leather accord and I deliberately overdosed the castoreum in it. And castoreum has this deeply feral animal sort of character.
Right.
It's kind of poopy, but it's more complicated than that. And I deliberately overdosed the castoreum and I got Leviathan. And
Interesting.
I went, I knew it.
Yeah.
it
Oh,
was it was one of those things where it sounded insane, and then when I actually did it, it worked
it
beautifully.
was not insane. Yeah, that's great.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Um, so I don't know if I'd call it a happy accident so much as vindication of what several people thought was a very strange idea.
And what you knew would work. So that's, yeah, that's
What I
great.
hoped would work. What I
Hoped.
hoped
Yes.
would work.
Fair enough. You ever do any other April Fool's jokes beyond Soap Makers of Awesome Town, which you
No,
mentioned earlier? No?
mostly because the Shave Nook decided that I had attempted to BS them into buying product because
Right.
I don't know. They were not good about taking jokes, those people, and honestly the internet's probably a little better off without without that particular forum.
Sure.
But that was the primary reason more than anything else was that I saw how people reacted and I was accused of untoward behavior and
Oh.
I that was not at all my intention. I just thought it was
No,
funny
of
and
course
like,
not.
the joke was right there. Like it's not,
Well, that's it.
but it was I
Not well
saw how
received.
angry. Yeah, I saw how angry these people got, and I was like, you know what? I don't need this.
Fair enough.
I really
That's
don't need this.
unfortunate, but yes, you definitely don't need that.
Yeah.
Do you use any other artisans shave products?
I get this question a lot. Um, and I do. I like House of Mammoth very much.
Yeah.
I will be completely upfront and say that I haven't tried Chris's new luxury base for Katie's
Oh,
Bubbles.
you should. It's great.
I hear it's very good. I just
Yeah.
I just haven't gotten there.
Yeah.
I mean, like I have soap everywhere.
I imagine.
Uh, I'm known to use MDC from time to time, especially during the summer.
Yeah.
I have oily skin, and so that high coconut content kind of helps keep
Sure.
that on the level a little
Yeah.
bit. Whether you regard MDC as an artisan or not is maybe the subject of some debate, but I would put them in that category.
Okay.
They're just a bigger artisan than the rest of us.
That's it.
Um, let's see. I have not been able to get a leather that I like out of Mystic Water.
Okay.
I know that this has been a sticking point for a lot of people over the years. I don't know if it's our water. The water here is very hard.
Sure.
I've never been able to get something that I love, but I did really try because I think Michelle's scents are wonderful, especially her lemon rose scent. It has a rose de limon, I think it's called,
Okay.
and it's very nice. I have not been able to get a lather that I really love out of it. I like Noble Otter quite a lot.
Yeah.
I've had grooming department soaps that I've liked, or not grooming department. It's now Eon Skincare. But
Okay.
under so Muhammad has made a number of soaps that I've liked. Um, but I genuinely couldn't tell you what base version they were. He is extraordinarily prolific. And I applaud him for pushing the envelope.
Yeah.
Um, but in terms of keeping track of what base it is, I mean, like these soaps are a few years old. I have no idea what base they
Sure.
are.
Fair enough.
But they're very nice. They
Yeah.
shave well. Uh, let's see who else. I mean, like the artisanal world has changed dramatically
I imagine.
in recent in even over the last 5 years. Oh, you know what? I tried. Doug Lane brought me a sample of his Puppy Kisses soap for
Oh,
his Adopted Acres Puppy Kisses soap. And that's nice. That's a nice soap.
okay.
It's a little sweet for my taste.
Yeah.
But I mean, like I'm not its target audience, and I like Doug's style. I like his branding. I think what he does is pretty cool.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah. And I Sterling makes nice soap.
Indeed.
I like a number of things that they manufacture. Their gin and tonic soap is terrific.
Yeah.
Um,
Okay. So you do use other artisans then?
yeah. I just I kind of go in and out from who I've used at any given time, and I'll be honest with you, like 95 times out of 100, I'm using my own stuff. A because it shaves the way I want to shave, and
Okay.
B because I have so much of it available.
Do you have a big collection of shave wares? Yes, of course. You're a soap maker, so you're,
No,
but no, you
no,
don't?
I don't. I
Okay.
don't. I gave it all away.
Really?
Um, yeah, you know what? You know what it was that I I wasn't using most of it.
Right. That's what ends up
And
happening.
so yeah, and so I like put it on the PIF table and things and gave it to
Oh,
people
great.
who I thought would use it.
Sure. Fantastic.
So,
Here's a recurring question on all of my segments. Would you use another man's used soap?
no,
Interesting. Most people say
no,
yes. Why?
no. Category because I think it's disgusting.
Ah, well,
No, no.
excellent. Excellent. Excellent for a change because most people are like,
Yeah.
yeah. And, when I started, I only found this community in 2021 in the middle of the pandemic.
Mm,
But, to get started and sort of build your library, if you will, used soap is often the case.
yeah, I know.
You
And
just, fair enough.
when I was younger, I was more willing to do it. Now, I mean, like I have done it.
Yeah.
Nowadays, no, I
Thoughts.
won't do it.
Okay.
I just in the in the wake of COVID and all the other things that are just kind of going around the world. Like I just got a smallpox vaccine, right?
Right. Yeah. Listen.
I'm young enough that I was not given a smallpox vaccine when I was a child. I had to
Yeah.
seek one out.
Wow. There you go. It's interesting. My girlfriend often talks about stranger's breath and how it's
Yep.
disturbing to her. So I really like
I
that
understand that.
term.
And
Yeah.
actually I think that'd be a great name for a perfume.
Right. Stranger's breath. Yeah. There you go. You're welcome.
Thank you. Well, thank her
Yes.
for me. I'll if I do that, I'll send her a bottle.
Fair enough. Excellent. Do you have any passions or hobbies outside of fragrance and soaping?
Yeah, quite a few. So I play D&D, which
Yeah.
is a lot of fun. I actually had a number of folks from the wet shaving community playing in a D&D game that I was DMing.
Oh,
I
great.
had to suspend it because I'm a little overwhelmed at the moment.
Yep.
But it's not gone for good. Like we will pick it back up
Okay.
probably over the summer. But Barry Bedford at Texan Shaves, Doug of Adopted Acres, they both played in the game.
Neat.
And I've been playing Magic since I was 8.
Yep.
So I learned to play Magic, Magic the Gathering, and that's Magic has changed quite a lot in
Imagine, especially
my
since you've been
life.
playing since you were 8. That's a long time.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, like I've taken time off. When I was in college, I didn't play a lot of Magic, and that was kind of a low point in Magic's history anyway.
Okay.
It's had its peaks and valleys over the years. I've always said on Reddit like I would love to play Magic with wet shavers.
Sure.
I think I think it would be an absolute joy, but nobody's ever taken me up on the offer,
Well,
unfortunately.
there you go. If I have any reach, which I probably don't, you heard it, wet shavers. Let's get a magic game going.
Yeah,
It will.
let me
Yeah.
know. One of my former clients, I haven't heard from this man in some time, but one of my former clients is actually an ex-pro Magic player.
Oh, really? Wow.
Yeah, and my affinity for the game is such that I have sponsored two different Magic podcasts over
As
the
Barrister and
years
Mann.
as Barrister and Mann.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Okay, neat.
Um, so there's that geekery.
Yeah,
Um, I have been trying to teach myself to play blues harmonica for some time, but I'm
fantastic.
currently just overloaded. I've been playing the piano since actually since I was 8.
Wow,
Um, but I'm just overloaded, and so I haven't really had any time to do anything with it, and it feels very much like something that I want to have the time to devote myself to properly.
sure. Understandable.
Um, but I do love the harmonica, and I love harmonica blues um, quite a lot. So
Sure.
yeah, and as I said, I play the piano,
Yeah.
not frequently. Actually, my girlfriend is currently in possession of my piano.
Okay.
I grew up in a house that was heated primarily by a wood burning stove,
Oh,
and you don't bring a you don't bring a piano into an environment like
no,
that. Um,
absolutely not.
it'll just obliterate it.
Yep.
And in addition to the fact that they're just damn difficult to move around. Whereas I have an electric studio piano. It's a full 88 keys. It's got wonderful hammer action. I've had it about 22 years,
Yeah.
and it sounds as good as the day I got it. It's
Right.
it's I don't even know if Roland is still in business. I think they are. I'm
They
pretty
are
sure Roland
sure.
still.
Yeah. Roland
Yeah,
is
yeah,
still a very popular keyboard, I think.
yeah, yeah. So I have a Roland studio piano that I
Okay.
love.
Hmm.
Um, but and it's maybe it's 50 pounds.
Yeah. Much more manageable for sure. For sure.
Yeah, yeah.
Here's another recurring question. Your favorite razor and why?
Ooh, that's a tough one. I've been through a lot of razors
I
over the
imagine.
years. I do not collect them.
Okay.
I either give them away or sell them. I actually have a couple of rare ones that I'm going to sell shortly. I have a Paradigm. I I think it's a TI2. I'm pretty sure it's a TI2.
Yeah.
So it's a titanium razor with one of Andy's very cool Art Deco Chrysler building inspired handles on it.
Oh, wow.
I'm not super crazy about the shave, but the thing is absolutely gorgeous, and it's
Piece of art.
titanium. Like that's pretty
Sure.
cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, I had a Wolfman for a while. I think it was a WR1. I think it was a WR1.
Yeah.
And I traded it actually for the Paradigm and for an Alumagoose version 2.
Oh, neat. Okay.
And when Mongoose Razors was still in business, um, they made the Mongoose one, which I didn't like. And then they debuted the Alumagoose, and I was still kind of iffy on it. And then I tried the Alumagoose V2, and I was like, "Wow, this is the razor for me." And
Okay.
then, of course, they shut down.
Hmm. Yeah.
So, and these things are made of aluminum. They're not stainless. They're not titanium. They're aluminum, and so I'm a little bit more cognizant of the fact that they're more fragile than either of those
Sure.
two materials. Although, I mean, like aluminum is still pretty tough.
Yeah.
Um, so until recently, I would have said that the Alumagoose is probably my favorite razor. I have a sort of a small rotation of razors. I have a Blackland Vector that I like a great deal. That was actually a gift from someone on the Secret Santa. That
Oh,
person
wow.
was very
That's a really
kind.
nice gift. I actually won a
Yeah, that was
Vector. I think it was a Lather Games prize, and I use it for my head. I
nice.
really, really love it.
Yeah, it's a great razor. I have such delicate baby skin that I can only use it every couple of days, and I use guarded blades in my single edge razors, so
Yeah.
um I'm that kind of pansy. But and it's
Well,
it's a
not at
little
all.
bit
I alternate because the regular Artist Club blade is sharp as heck. It really
yeah.
can do some damage, and it has done
Yeah,
some damage to my head. So
I
I,
believe it. I believe it. They're wicked.
yeah.
Um so I like my Vector. I have a Rex Ambassador
Well,
that was a gift from a friend of mine that I like very much. The build quality is astonishing on these things.
okay.
Just like that incredibly smooth, infinite adjustability. Like wow, just the
Yeah.
the haptic feedback on the thing is just wonderful. Um, let's see. I have an old style above the tie S1 humpback slant.
Okay.
which I bought, I think, 2015.
Wow.
So Stan was still running above the tie at the time, and it was before he changed the design because people were upset because they thought it had uneven blade exposure, which was not true. It was just how the
Incredible.
razor looked. It
Yes.
shaves fine, like it still shaves extremely well. It's a wonderful
I
razor.
imagine. Yeah.
But yeah, in another one of those razors I can only shave with, once every few days. Like I couldn't do like multiple days in a row with the S1. My face would just bleed everywhere.
Right.
I just can't do it. So I do like the Illuma Geese, whatever you want to call them.
Yes, yeah.
Um, and I when we did the collaboration with the folks at Lockhart's Grooming, and they brought back Behold the Whatsis.
Yeah.
They simultaneously launched it with Proof Razor
Oh,
that they had gotten from High Proof Razors in Montana,
yeah.
and it's a pivoting head, which I mean, like I know that that's sort of a controversial thing in the wet shaving industry these days, but it is a pivoting head, and unlike a one blade or anything else, it uses just half DE blades. I use perma sharps in mine because they come split. I don't have to cut anything. That's
Yeah.
nice. But to be honest with you, it shaves exceptionally well. Um, and I have a couple of Hensons, and the Hensons shave well. I used to think that Henson had bridged the gap between cartridge razors and the wet shaving industry because they had built a double edged razor that was foolproof, or basically foolproof.
Okay.
I actually think that companies like Proof are more in that category.
Interesting.
It's easier to adjust to a razor like a Proof coming from say a Gillette, whatever,
Yeah.
you know,
Cartridge razor. Yeah.
rock, yeah, cartridge razor,
Yeah.
however many blades it has. It's much easier to adjust to it because you're used to the pivoting head.
Sure.
And I have been shaving with a fixed head razor for so long that it took me a little bit to get used to this thing. I had to
Imagine.
kind of unlearn everything that I knew about shaving,
Right.
and I sort of had to forget most of what I knew, and all the muscle memory was the thing. But it shaves really really well.
Interesting.
It shaves
Never tried it. I'll
really
have to
well.
try it. It's
Yeah.
a good sales
Like
pitch.
I said, be forewarned if you're used to a fixed head razor, which I'm sure you are. Um, it takes some unlearning
Fair
to
enough.
to learn how to use it properly.
Yeah.
You might nick yourself the first few times because you fight it.
Yeah.
It's hard to get used to the fact that this thing is always flat against your skin.
Okay. And I've
And it
started
it
shaving
just
straight razors, so that too has been a complete
yeah,
curve.
yeah. I could never get into straights. I have a few vintage straights. I have a Wade and Butcher 6/8 barber's notch.
Nice.
Um, and I don't know. I think it's quarter hollow, maybe. It's a
Yeah.
heavy blade.
Yeah.
But I could just never get into it. They're just here was the thing. Like I appreciate the craft and skill of it, but at the end of the day, I got into this because I want to bleed less, not more.
Makes sense. Yeah, yeah,
So,
that's perfectly reasonable. And I
and I get
understand.
I get good shaves with my preferred razors. Like I don't feel the need to learn
For
straight
sure.
razor shaving
And
at
I
this
mean,
point in
I've
my
said it
life.
before, but to be perfectly honest, my technique is not there yet. So with my, Blackbird, I can get a much closer shave than
That's
futzing
fair.
around
Yeah.
with a straight, although it's the challenge of learning to use that and mastering the control
Right.
and not butchering my face. That's the fun for me
Right.
in any case.
Right. No, that's fair.
Yeah. So for someone that works with so many scents and knows such a vast amount about perfumery and such, do you have a favorite scent note that stands out above others?
I have one that I use more than anything else,
Okay.
and that is smoke with a capital S.
Yes.
And I mean that exactly the way I describe it. Um, my fragrances have a reputation for being smoky, and I am frequently heard to say that a lot of times things can be balanced out by the presence of some kind of smoky element.
Interesting.
Whether that's a very smoky material like cade oil or birch tar,
Yeah.
or if that's something more like labdanum, or it's screwball weirdo distillate hydrocarborazine,
Hmm.
or oud, or cypriol, or vetiver, or any of those things.
Yeah.
I grew up in a house where when the temperature even began to approach freezing, the house smelled like wood smoke.
Sure.
And so it was an omnipresent part of my life for much of my life.
Okay.
And as a result, I got used to it.
Yeah.
And it became sort of an essential character of a lot of things. And so
Interesting.
I attribute that fact more than anything else to the fact that I tend to almost unconsciously put smoke in things.
Okay.
Or I select smoky materials because I like them.
Sure.
Um,
Well, and I
so it,
imagine
the
it evokes some sense of comfort or well, certainly
Yeah,
harkens back to, your younger days. So that makes a lot of
yeah,
sense. Okay.
yeah, and like the original Hallows used a completely different version, a completely different type of vetiver than what we use now, because the vetiver we were using then, Sri Lankan vetiver, has since gone extinct.
Oh,
But
that's
it was a
bad.
subspecies. It was a variant species. Yeah, it was a variant species, not a subspecies. And it was the stuff was jet black, Ray.
Oh, really? Wow.
Yeah, the oil was jet black. I've never seen anything like it.
Yeah.
And it smelled like a swamp fire.
Yeah.
And it was so cool, but the entire species was wiped out by volcanic eruptions in Sri Lanka.
That's terrible.
And that was the end of it. And I could never get it again.
And they
Quite
haven't
enough.
replicated that chemically or synthetically? No.
You can't make synthetic vetiver.
Oh, really?
Even vetiverol and vetiveryl acetate have to be refined from actual vetiver oil.
Interesting. Okay.
I don't know why,
Hmm.
to be entirely honest with you, but I do know that you cannot manufacture synthetic vetiver materials, or at least those particular materials cannot be manufactured synthetically. And those are the fundamental vetiver materials in perfumery.
Sure. Right. Hmm. So, last question for you, Will.
Mhm.
Future plans for Barrister and Mann and or Berceuse. Parfum. Uh,
So, as I have said to a number of people, when my father passed away in December, he left a hell of a hole.
oh, I imagine.
Not only in my personal life and in my mother's and my lives, but also in Barrister and Mann, of which he had been a major part for as long as it existed. He was sort of
Right.
the silent partner. I used to joke to people that I was the chemist and he was the engineer. And
Okay.
so now I find myself without an engineer, and his knowledge of mechanics and structural engineering and any number of disciplines, things that I know, to be honest with you, very little about,
Yeah.
was vast. It seemed almost endless.
Mm-hmm.
And so, with the loss of all of that knowledge, um, we have to adapt.
Yes.
And so, and the other thing is that my mother's 73. We can't do this forever. I can't do it by myself. I don't want to do it by myself.
Right.
So, what is going to happen, and you have the exclusive, Ray. This is the first
Oh,
time I have said this outside of the Maggard meetup.
right. Well,
Um,
thank you for
we
that.
will be yeah, we'll be moving fulfillment to a third party warehouse located in the central US.
Okay.
And that's going to start in the next few weeks. Like we're gonna do the 42 in Fougere Gothique launch, and then a few weeks after that, we're going to stop fulfilling orders for like 2 weeks while our entire stock is in transit.
Yeah. That's
And then the other thing is that my lovely girlfriend has been waiting for me to kind of figure out what to do with this for what'll be 9 years in August.
Oh, wow. Congrats.
And she hasn't left me.
It's
So
a good thing.
she's been that's true love. She's been astonishingly patient.
Fantastic.
And but I'm 36. It's time for me to do something else with my life.
Okay.
So, I'm not going anywhere. Barrister and Mann is not going anywhere, but I will be handing off production to another artisan. I'm not gonna tell you who just yet, but I mean, like, I think when everybody hears this decision, and primarily the only reason that this has been hung up is that I want to make sure that we have all the terms of everything worked out, and this other artisan is happy to let me do that, and attorneys keep ghosting me, and I'm
Isn't
not
that
I'm not a
ironic?
contracts. It's a bloody annoying, and so, but I'm not a contracts attorney, and this is very specialized work,
I imagine. Yes.
and it's very much the kind of thing where I do not want to screw it up.
No. Of course
So,
no.
but they keep ghosting me. I've been through like three of them now, where they just,
Incredible.
I call them and, oh yeah, we'll email you with some potential meeting times, and then I send them an email and I don't hear anything, and
Mm.
they don't call me back, and it's like, all right, fine, I guess I'll find somebody else.
Lawyers.
So that, yeah, oh God, lawyers. The reason I don't practice law is that I went to law school with lawyers, with people
Yeah.
who were going to be lawyers,
Yes.
and let me tell you, I don't like lawyers.
Fair enough.
Lawyers are some of the most unhappy people imaginable. I mean, like, of course there are happy lawyers, um, but a lot of lawyers are overworked and underpaid and
Yes.
overstressed, and people tell them how terrible they are as people. And I'll tell you something: everybody hates lawyers until they need one.
Well, that's it, right?
Um, yeah,
Lawyers are
and
nonetheless important.
yeah, yeah, they're one of those fundamental pillars of society. Like, we need certain things. We need some sort of functioning healthcare system.
Yes.
We need soap. We need a bankruptcy system.
Yeah.
We need money. There's a fascinating book called Sapiens by Yaniv Noah Harel.
I know it well.
That's Do you? Great.
Oh,
Okay.
yes.
So, yeah, for anybody who hasn't read it, it's about the anthropological history of the human race as a species.
Yes.
And it specifically devotes a significant section of itself to the development of money.
Yeah.
And what a remarkable occurrence that was in the progress of the species, the idea that we had a fundamental universal exchange rate for things.
Right.
You know, a pair of boots was not worth 5 loaves of bread and 30 fish. It was worth, say, 10 gold coins.
That's right.
And what a remarkable concept that was. And so, um, as I said, everybody hates lawyers until they need one, but they're a pretty fundamental part of society, love them or hate them.
Yep.
Anyway, the point of this is that I will be handing off production to a soap artisan who's here in the US,
Okay.
someone who's been doing this a long time, who's very highly regarded by the community, somebody that I feel that I can trust to do this properly.
Right.
And I will still be, very much a part of the brand. I will still be making all the fragrances myself and shipping them to this artisan. And I'll still be composing new fragrances, and I'll still be doing all the customer service and all the interaction and all the social media and all that stuff.
Yep.
But it's time for me to do something where I'm not, beating my hands bloody in the crucible of the soap industry.
Understandable.
Um,
That's
this is something they don't talk about, and something that I really kind of wish more artisans would talk about, actually, is that the soap business is very physically demanding.
I imagine.
Because it's a trade, and a lot of trades are physically demanding.
Right.
And so, I mean, like, you need a high shear mixer in order to blend soap, and it's really hard to get one that is, that moves around and gets everything in a reaction vessel. And so I use a big wearing immersion blender, like one of
Yes.
those big commercial immersion blenders.
Yep.
But the thing is, the vibrations kill your hands after a while. Like, I'm 36, I've got carpal tunnel syndrome, you
Wow.
know.
From that.
Yeah, from that. I've got burns all over my arms from lye and hot
Gosh.
equipment and all manner of things. I mean,
Sure.
like, yeah, people are like, oh, well, you got to wear PPE. It's like, I do wear PPE, but like,
Still get,
sometimes this
yeah.
stuff is just, it's just a problem. And so, um, I don't know how much more of how much more of this my body can take, and I don't know how much more I want to do. I mean,
Sure.
like,
Yeah. Fair
I'm not
enough.
even 40. I have a lot of, God, I hope I have a fair
You
amount of life left. I mean, like my father died at
absolutely
70, so, I'm older now than he was when I was born.
right.
But, and I'll be honest with you, Ray, like that caught us completely by surprise. And this was a man who had no history of heart problems whatsoever. And
Really
he just dropped dead out in the front yard. It was awful.
horrific. I'm so sorry to hear that.
Yeah.
Really
Thank you. It was
unthinkable.
more just, yeah, it was more just, it sort of threw into sharp relief the fact that, I mean, like it's the human condition, right?
Well, that's it.
You never know how much time you have left. I mean, like
You never know.
you could drop dead one day.
But I mean, that's the worst part when someone's taken from you so suddenly. I mean, I watched my
Yeah.
father die of cancer, but it was a 5-year process. So I was, despite the fact that it was horrific, I was able to reconcile
Yeah.
what was coming, but I couldn't imagine if he just sort of upped and left out of nowhere. That's really
Yeah.
quite a
I
hard thing to deal with.
I said to someone recently, and it's in its own screwed up way, that is kinder. Because it's easier for you to make your peace with it. Or at least you have more opportunity to make your peace
Yes,
with
well,
it.
that's it. That's it. Absolutely. Yeah.
And I've said to my mother since, I was like, it's not what I would have said to my father that bothers me.
Mm,
It's the fact that I know for certain that there are things that he would have wanted to say to me.
right.
And when I found him, he was I found him.
Oh gosh.
And when I found him, he was already gone.
Yeah. That's
So he just dropped. There was no warning. There was nothing. And so, I attempted CPR and we called the
oh
EMTs and the
wow.
whole thing. And
That's
he
wow.
had been dead for probably 10 minutes already. He was
Gosh.
already blue. Which I'm
Imagine.
sorry if that's graphic. I don't mean to
No, not
turn
at
it into
all. It's
such a
it's
dark place.
I feel your
It
pain.
was it was like I said, it was more just I know for a fact that there would have been things that he would have wanted to say to me. And
Absolutely.
it's unfortunate that he didn't get to say them. And so, like, the loss of a loved one is unequivocally terrible,
Yes.
except in unusual circumstances. We're like, screw it, who cares?
Very
Well,
unusual circumstances, but yes.
my father and my grandfather were deeply estranged, and that was very much my father's reaction when he found out my grandfather had passed away in
Okay.
2017.
But very much
You
not the
know,
case, it sounds like, with you and your father.
no, no, not at all.
Oh,
Um, and so it's awful no matter what. But as you said, that sudden exit in its way is just indescribable.
right. Yeah.
Because it's you could be talking like I remember the very last words I said to my father, and they were about getting our dog, one of our dogs, um, surgery for one of his hind legs.
Right.
And that was the last thing I ever said to
Well,
my
but
father.
that, how are you to know? That's the problem. And
No, no, of course, and that's the point. Like,
yeah,
how are you to know? And
right.
that's the bad part about it, or one of the bad parts about it. But
Absolutely.
um, yeah. So as I said, with his loss and the loss of all of his knowledge and his expertise and his ability to think about these things in a way that I that's just foreign to me.
Yeah,
Um, I will we will need to adapt. And
sure.
so, I don't want to die with this being the only thing that I've done.
That's fair.
And so, it's time for, my mother is now a widow.
Yeah.
Um, we don't have a lot of other family. I'm an only child.
Okay.
My mother is one of four children, but I'm an only child.
Yeah.
And so it's one of those things where I would like to go and do more. I want to go
Sure.
do more things, something else.
Yeah.
Um,
I
and
think that's
so
great. time for a new
Yeah.
chapter, and it's absolutely reasonable. And the good news is, well, I'll still be able to enjoy your products.
Yeah. Yeah, that's, I don't want to just kill it I don't want to just kill
No,
it here. That's silly. I mean, like so many people enjoy what we do. I enjoy it.
that's
I
great.
just, I need some breathing room.
Sounds fair and reasonable to me. And I do hope that you get the breathing room that you need.
Thank you.
Yeah. And this has been wonderful. So, I want to thank you again for your time and your wit and your savvy and all of it. It's been really a pleasure for me to chat with you, Will.
My pleasure, Ray, really.
Well, thank you. And to our listeners, thanks for tuning in as always, and we will speak to you next time.